Thank you for joining Wars of the Roses. As we continue with Part 10, The Symbols and Legends of Masonry, from Ancient Mysteries and Modern Masonry, by Charles H. Vail. Lecture 10, The Symbols and Legends of Masonry. The real secrets of Masonry lie concealed in its symbols and legends. These symbols and legends are the means by which the divine truths of Masonry are conveyed to the neophyte. This was the method of instruction in the ancient mysteries, and it was naturally adopted in the institution of Freemasonry. To form symbols and to interpret them, says Creuzer, were the main occupations of the ancient priesthood, and the myths were invented to illustrate a philosophic or religious truth. Dr. Mackey, after discussing the question of myths, says it must be evident from all that has been said respecting the analogy in origin and design between the Masonic and the ancient religious myths, that no one acquainted with the true science of this subject can for a moment contend that all the legends and traditions of the order are, to the very letter, historical facts. Symbolism of Freemasonry, Mackey, page 207. He gives as an illustration of this the myth of the winding stairs, which, he says, taken in its literal sense, is in all its parts opposed to history and probability. Again, he calls attention to the myth, which traces the origin of Freemasonry to the beginning of the world, a myth which is, he says, even to this day, ignorantly interpreted by some as an historical fact, and the reference to which is still preserved in the date of Anno Lucis, which is affixed to all Masonic documents. This he calls a philosophical myth, symbolizing the idea which analogically connects the creation of physical light in the universe with the birth of Masonic or spiritual and intellectual light in the candidate. The one is the type of the other, page 211. In the legends of the Master's degree and of the Royal Arch, he points out that there is a commingling of the historical myth and the mythical history, so that much care must be taken in discriminating between the different elements. Dr. Mackey then sums up the duty of a Mason as follows: he who desires properly to appreciate the profound wisdom of the institution of which he is the disciple must not be content with uninquiring credulity to accept all the traditions that are imparted to him as veritable histories, nor yet with unphilosophic incredulity to reject them in a mass as fabulous inventions. In these extremes there is equal error. The myth, says Hermann, is the representation of an idea. It is for that idea that the student must search in the myths of Masonry. Beneath every one of them there is something richer and more spiritual than the mere narrative. Everyone, therefore, who desires to be a skillful Mason must not suppose that the task is accomplished by a perfect knowledge of the mere phraseology of the ritual, by a readiness in opening and closing a lodge, nor by an offhand capacity to confer degrees. All these are good in their places, but without the internal meaning they are but mere child's play. He must study the myths, the traditions and the symbols of the order and learn their true interpretation. For this alone constitutes the science and the philosophy, the end, aim and design of speculative Masonry. Page 212, 214. These deeper things, as Dr. Mackey intimates, are not found in the monitorial explanations. J.D. Buck, a 32nd degree Mason, in his wonderful book on mystic Masonry says, the most profound secrets of Masonry are not revealed in the lodge at all. They belong only to the few. But these secrets must be sought by the individual himself, and the candidate is debarred from possessing them solely by his own inattention to the hints everywhere given in the ritual of the lodge, or by his indifference to the subject. If he prefers to treat the whole subject with contempt, and to deny that any such real knowledge exists, it becomes evident that he not only closes the door against the possibility of himself possessing such knowledge, but he also becomes impervious to any evidence of its existence that might come to him at any time. He has no one but himself to blame if he is left in darkness. Mystic Masonry, Buck, page 36. The ritual and monitorial lessons of the lodge teach nothing new, and the explanations of the symbols are often puerile and inadequate. General Pike says, there is no sight under the sun more pitiful and ludicrous at once than the spectacle of the Prestons and the Webbs, not to mention the later incarnations of dullness and commonplace, undertaking to explain the old symbols of Masonry and adding to and improving them or inventing new ones, to the circle enclosing the central point and itself traced between two parallel lines, a figure purely Kabbalistic. These persons have added the superimposed Bible and even reared on that the ladder with 3 or 9 rounds, and then given a vapid interpretation of the whole, so profoundly absurd as actually to excite admiration. Morals and Dogma, Pike, page 105. The exegesis is also often crude. This is not strange, as the ritual was written before the days of modern biblical scholarship, and perhaps it would be well if the ritual were revised. These immature conceptions could be eliminated without affecting the meaning and beauty of the ceremonies. However, if we bear in mind that Masonry does not endorse its legends as literal facts, no harm can be done. We will now consider some of the symbols and myths of the fraternity. The Lodge. The Lodge represents King Solomon's temple. The temple is a symbolic image of the universe, and as such is symbolic in all its parts and arrangements. Therefore, the Temple of Solomon resembles all the temples of antiquity that practiced the mysteries. The Hebrews, like other peoples, made much of the system of numbers to convey their hidden meaning. The Holy of Holies formed a cube corresponding to the number 4, which represents manifested nature, while the 3 sides or faces of the figure, when drawn on a plane surface, represented the deity, the 3 aspects of will, wisdom, and activity, intelligence. Everything within the temple was symbolically arranged. The ceiling, supported by 12 columns, represented the 12 months of the year. The borders around the columns and the candlestick with the 12 lights represented the 12 signs of the zodiac. The 7 lights, the 7 planets. The veils of 4 colors represented the 4 elements, etc. In the Royal Arch degree of the American Rite, the tabernacle has 4 veils of different colors, to each of which belongs a banner. And on each banner is inscribed one of the 4 images, the bull, the lion, the man, the eagle. These constellations answered to the equatorial and solstitial points of 2,500 years BC. The 4 signs, Taurus, Leo, Scorpio, and Aquarius, were termed the fixed signs and are assigned to the 4 veils. The sun entered Taurus at the vernal equinox, Leo at the summer solstice, Scorpio at the autumnal equinox, for which, on account of its malignant influence, Aquila, the eagle, was substituted, and Aquarius at the winter solstice. Every temple was a representation of the universe, and in them the great lights of nature played an important part. The images of the sun, moon, and Mercury were represented, and even in our lodge rooms they constitute the 3 lights, except that for Mercury the master of the lodge has been substituted. Eusebius tells us that the officers of the Eleusinian mysteries were the Hierophant, representing the great architect of the universe, the torchbearer representing the sun, the altar-bearer representing the moon, and the sacred herald representing Mercury. The latter was charged with excluding the profane from the mysteries. Every lodge, as we have said, represents the temple. The 2 great columns between which you pass as you enter the lodge represent the 2 great pillars, 30 feet 8 inches high, 6 feet 10 inches in diameter, which stood in the porch of the temple on either side of the eastern gateway. These columns represent the 2 pillars of Hercules, the solstices Capricorn and Cancer, the 2 gates of heaven, and were imitations by the Tyrian artist of the columns at the entrance of the temple of Malkarth in Tyre. The lodge is said to be due east and west, as King Solomon's temple was so situated. All the temples of antiquity were usually thus built. Pythagoras also arranged his assemblies due east and west because he held that motion began in the east and proceeded west. The Egyptian and Mexican pyramids were also built to the 4 cardinal points of the compass, while beneath the temple, extending east and west, was a subterranean cavern used for initiation. No well-equipped lodge is lacking in this particular. The furnishing of the lodge. The Holy Bible, square and compasses, together with a charter or dispensation, constitute the furnishings of the lodge. 1. The Holy Bible. This in a Christian lodge consists of the Old and New Testaments. A Hebrew lodge would use the Old Testament only, a Mohammedan lodge, the Quran. In like manner, a Buddhist lodge could use the Tripitaka, a Hindu lodge, the Vedas, etc. The obligation of the candidate is always taken on the sacred book of his religion, for his holy Bible is his light, in accordance with which he should live and walk. 2. The square and compasses. These symbols are perhaps the most familiar to the general public of any in Masonry. I need not dwell on the lessons in morality which the square and compasses teach. Masonry is, however, something more than a system of morality, and it is this inner significance that I have endeavored to set forth. There is a science and philosophy concealed in these symbols, which Dr. Buck explains as follows. The square, with its one right angle and its scale of measurements, applies to surfaces and solids, and deals with the apparently fixed states of matter. It represents solidarity, symmetry, and proportion, and this involves the sciences of arithmetic and geometry. The compasses with movable angles set in the lodge at an angle of 60 degrees applies to the circle and the sphere, to movements and revolutions. In a general sense, the square is a symbol of matter and the earth, the compasses of spirit and the heavens. Mystic Masonry Buck, page 242. The position of the square and compasses indicates the progress of the candidate from entered apprentice to that of master mason. The ornaments. The ornaments of a lodge are the mosaic pavement, the indented tessel, and the blazing star. The mosaic pavement is supposed to represent the ground floor of King Solomon's temple, the indented tessel, the border or skirting surrounding it. There is no evidence that either existed in the ancient temple, but the symbol is significant as it denotes the checkered course of life. Also the two opposing principles in nature, light and darkness, Michael and Satan, Balder and Loki, Ormuzd and Ahriman, etc. The blazing star also represents these two principles. If the point is turned upward, it represents God, good order, or the Lamb of Ormuzd and St. John. If the point is turned downward, it denotes Lucifer, evil, disorder, or the accursed goat of Mendes and the mysteries. The blazing star or pentagram also represents the human body, the 5 points representing the 4 limbs and head. It is thus called the sign of the microcosm. All the mysteries of magic were said to be summed up in this symbol. Paracelsus pronounces it the greatest and most potent of all signs. The all-seeing eye. This symbol, in the ancient mysteries, indicated the sight that annuls time and space. This is the symbol of the higher clairvoyance. The master always possessed this sight. In India, this all-seeing eye was called the Eye of Siva. The Egyptians represented Osiris by the symbol of an open eye and placed this hieroglyphic of him in all their temples. In the lodge, the all-seeing eye represents the omniscience of God, the eye that never sleeps. It may also represent, as in the ancient mysteries, the higher vision. The letter G. This letter is the natural symbol among English-speaking people for God. It is a substitute in American lodges for the Hebrew Yod, which is the Kabbalistic symbol for unity. In France, the letter Yod is put in the blazing star. The clasped hands. This symbol was used by Pythagoras and represented the sacred number 10, the number expressed by the mysterious tetractys. This figure was represented in the form of the triangle. The Hebrews formed it with the letters of the divine name. Both Pythagoras and the Hebrew priests borrowed the figure from the sacred science of Egypt. The triangle and double triangle. All the nations of antiquity considered the triangle as sacred. It was one of the most common symbols for the deity. The 3 sides typify the 3 aspects of God: will, wisdom, and intelligence. Here we have the Trinity in unity. The double triangle interlaced symbolizes the manifested universe, the union of spirit and matter. The triangle pointing upward is spirit or fire. The one pointing downward is matter or water. One represents the descent of spirit into matter, the other the ascent of matter to spirit. The union of the two in the manifested universe is inseparable. This double triangle is used in India to symbolize 2 Hindu gods, or rather the 2 aspects of Ishvara, Shiva and Vishnu. It also represents the 6 points, the senare, which with the point in the center is the septenary. The light. There are 3 greater and 3 lesser lights in Masonry, and though the ritual does not give any explanation of these symbols, there is an important meaning connected with them. The sun is an ancient symbol of the Logos. It signifies the male aspect, the life-giving and generative power. God is the source of light, and light is the cause of life. The moon represents the passive or female aspect of nature. Jacob's ladder. The mystical ladder which Jacob in his vision saw extending from earth to heaven was a common symbol in the ancient mysteries and was always composed of 7 steps or rounds. The ladder symbolized the progress of man from his present to higher conditions, each round representing one of the 7 stages of his evolutionary progress. In the mysteries of Persia and India, this mystic ladder was an important symbol, especially in the former, where a ladder of 7 rounds was erected in each of their temples. The 7 steps also correspond to the 7 gates through which the candidate was passed successively in his journeyings through the 7 caverns of initiation, and symbolized the 7 conditions or subplanes of Hades. The 7 steps, 7 gates, 7 halls, 7 worlds, 7 planes, etc., are all symbols of the various stages of the soul's progress. The ancient initiates held that the evolution of the human soul took place through a series of 7 globes situated on the 3 lower planes of the universe. The life wave passes 7 times round this world chain and through 7 stages on each globe. The progress involves a downward and an upward arc, a descent of spirit into matter and a reascent of spirit to God. This is symbolized in Jacob's vision by the angels ascending and descending. Jacob's ladder is sometimes misrepresented with 3 or 9 rounds. It should have 7. Dr. Mackey says that the error arose from the ignorance of those inventors who first engraved the Masonic symbols for our monitors. The ladder of Masonry, like the equipollent ladders of its kindred institutions, always had 7 steps, although in modern times the 3 principal or upper ones are alone alluded to. These rounds, beginning at the lowest, are temperance, fortitude, prudence, justice, faith, hope, and charity. The Symbolism of Freemasonry, Mackey, page 120. The application of these virtues, however, is a later addition to symbolism. The 7 rounds are also emblematical of the 7 planes of the universe: physical, astral, mental, buddhic, atmic, anupadika, and adi. The 7 ancient elements: earth, water, fire, air, ether, and 2 unnamed, the 7 subplanes of the astral world: astral, solid, liquid, gaseous, etheric, superetheric, subatomic, and atomic. The 7 metals: lead, quicksilver, copper, tin, iron, silver, and gold. The 7 colors: black, purple, green, blue, red, white, and yellow. The 7 stones: diamond, amethyst, emerald, sapphire, ruby, pearl, and topaz. The 7 ancient planets: Saturn, Mercury, Venus, Jupiter, Mars, Luna, and Sol. Thus, the 7-stepped ladder had various applications and correspondences. Its presence in the Masonic institutions is evidence of the close analogy between Freemasonry and the ancient mysteries. The right-angled triangle, or the 47th problem of Euclid. This is one of the most important symbols of antiquity. The perpendicular line, whose measurement is 3, represents the active male principle. The baseline, whose measurement is 4, represents the passive female principle. And their union, or the addition of the squares of these numbers, will produce a square whose root will be the hypotenuse, a line measured by 5 and representing the universe. The square of the perpendicular and base, 9 plus 16 equals 25. The square root of which is 5, the number of the hypotenuse. It was taught in all the mysteries that the union of the male and female principles of nature produced the universe. This is the occult meaning of the 47th problem of Euclid. The sum of the squares of the perpendicular and base of a right-angled triangle equals the square of the hypotenuse. This is a symbol of perfect proportion between number and forms, between spirit and matter. The 3 sides of the triangle bear the proportions, as we have seen, of 3, 4, and 5, and 3 power of 2 plus 4 power of 2 equals 5 power of 2. Or 9 plus 16 equals 25. Also 9 plus 16 plus 25 equals 50. Thus the number 50 is based on the proportion of the sides of the right-angled triangle. Philo speaks of 2 series which he calls triangles and squares, namely 1, 3, 6, 10, and 1, 4, 9, 16. With regard to the triangle series 1, 3, 6, 10, it is interesting to note that 1 equals 1, 3 equals 1 plus 2, 6 equals 1 plus 2 plus 3, and 10 equals 1 plus 2 plus 3 plus 4. In the square series 1, 4, 9, 16, 1 equals 1 power of 2, 4 equals 2 power of 2, 9 equals 3 power of 2, and 16 equals 4 power of 2. 1 plus 3 plus 6 plus 10 equals 20, and 1 plus 4 plus 9 plus 16 equals 30. And 20 plus 30 equals 50. 50 was a sacred number and was derived from the right-angled triangle. The greatest Jewish festival, Jubilee, took place every 50 years. The lambskin or white leather apron. In the ancient mysteries, the investiture of the apron formed an essential part of the ceremony of initiation. The apron and white robe were symbols of purity. In Persia, the investiture was exceedingly imposing. The candidate, having taken the oath of secrecy, was given the insignia of the order: the girdle, the tiara, the white apron, and the purple tunic. The Japanese candidate was also clothed in certain garments, which consisted of a loose tunic and white apron bound round the loins with a girdle. In the degree of holiness practiced by the Pharisees, the novitiate was also given an apron as a symbol of purity. The Essenes and Druids invested their candidates with a white robe, and the Scandinavians gave the candidate a white shield. In all these ceremonies, whatever the material or form, the symbolic significance was always the same. The white apron of Masonry was derived from these ancient ceremonies and is one of the most significant symbols in our order. The color white having been an emblem of light and purity from time immemorial. The shape and combination of the Masonic apron is that of a triangle overlapping a square, representing the occult septenary nature of man. The triangle symbolizes spirit, or the 3 highest principles. The square or quaternary, the 4 lowest. Each principle is correlated to a plane, a round, and a race. The spiritual triad is the spiritual body of St. Paul, and the quaternary, the natural body. The triad, which is the immortal part of man, contains potentially all the powers of divinity. And to develop these latent attributes, it must descend into matter. The triangle must incarnate in the square. This is represented in Masonry by the degree of entered apprentice and is symbolized by the way in which the apprentice is taught to wear his apron. The spiritual is subordinate to the material, earthly desires and passions rule supreme. But the candidate is here to learn to subdue his passions. His partial success is represented by the degree of fellow craft, and is symbolized by the way he wears his apron in that degree. The complete triumph of the spiritual is represented by the Master Mason degree, and is again indicated by the apron. This state was represented in the ancient mysteries by the mystical death and resurrection of the candidate. The perfected initiate has mastered his lower nature and has become the perfect man, Hermes, Buddha, or Christ. The symbolism of the apron is indeed far-reaching. Let every Mason remember how he impersonated the Grand Master. He should never forget its deep significance. In the ancient mysteries, the candidate did not merely impersonate the master, he himself became the master, the ceremony merely symbolizing what he became. It is a mistake to suppose, as some writers have, that the candidate in the mystic rites was merely representing the events connected with the tragedy of the master or god from whom the mysteries derived their name. The story of the master or god was wholly an allegory of the experiences of the initiate, while the rites were but typical of the various stages in the growth of the soul. In the process of becoming a Christ, he represents all those who have attained the Christ state, for all masters have passed through the experiences symbolized by the myth. Masonry has a truer conception than any exoteric religion, for these religions take the symbol for the thing symbolized, but Masonry, in making the candidate impersonate Hiram, has preserved the original teaching. Hiram is identical with the sun gods of all nations. It is a universal glyph. For all real initiation is an internal process, a regeneration, the consummation of which is the perfect man or master, the goal of human evolution. In the ancient mysteries, there was a further rite which symbolized the next stage, that of union with the divine, the at-one-ment. This was the ascension and is symbolized by the square enclosed in the triangle. The lower nature is here refined and ascends to the Father. God is all in all. As we have already said, each principle in man's constitution is correlated to a plane. A knowledge of these planes would enable a man by a trained will to direct the forces on each plane. Such is the power of a real master. Thank you for watching, and please don't forget to share, like, subscribe, and comment. And if you can, Please consider donating to Wars of the Roses. Links to PayPal and Patreon are in the description. Thank you so very much.